Estamos viviendo un tiempo diferente, un tiempo de pandemia, pero eso no es todo. Estamos viviendo un tiempo también en que los gobiernos consideran que por la pandemia pueden limitar las libertades individuales. Deirdre McCloskey, una economista muy reconocida en todo el mundo, ha escrito precisamente sobre este tema. Ha señalado que finalmente, a través de la pandemia o con la excusa de la pandemia, los gobiernos quieren robarnos nuestras libertades. Yo quiero agradecerle a Deirdre McCloskey que nos haya permitido entrar hasta su cocina, to go into her kitchen, para hablar precisamente sobre este tema. Deirdre, thank you for letting us into your kitchen to talk about this issue.
This is what you get.
Okay, you've warned us that actually some governments are trying to rob us of our freedoms using the epidemic as an excuse. Tell us about it.
Yeah. Well, they use any excuse. I mean, it's not so much that our leaders are evil people, although I must say I think the leader of the United States is evil right now, but that there's just a natural tendency for people who have the monopoly of violence, which a government, thank God, has, to expand it, to make it has a natural tendency to get bigger and bigger. And on the other side, we, the citizens, tend to say, well, why didn't the government help me this time? Why isn't the government protecting me from that or this?
We have seen some countries, some governments that have actually compelled people to remain at home, and they've forbidden them to go out to work, to go out to visit relatives. Is this correct? Is this appropriate? Does it work?
Well, look, because some governments didn't do the coercion early, they had to do the big coercion late. And the extreme examples of this are my own country, Estados Unidos, and Britain, England. On the other hand, those countries, democracies, free countries, that jumped on it, that did it quickly, New Zealand, Korea, Taiwan, Iceland, even Germany to some extent, did it early enough that the coercion didn't have to last very long and was somewhat moderate. But if you don't do the testing and tracing and isolation, the quarantine, early, then you have to go back to a kind of medieval technique. Make everyone stay at home, like I am. I'm staying at home right now. And it damages people's lives very much. So it's the incompetency. The lesson I would like to draw from the current crisis and the reaction to it is that a small, competent government that uses coercion is better than a very large, incompetent government that then in the end has to do crazy stuff like making everyone stay at home.
If the lockdown is not the solution, what would have you recommended? What would have you told your president and other governments?
Well, but in a way, I think the lockdown is the solution. But it's got to be applied right. It's like, it's exactly like a forest fire, okay? If you just say, oh, well, don't worry, the forest fire isn't very large, let's not do anything about it, let's not send any firefighters out, then of course you're going to get a big forest fire, which is really hard to control. And we've actually seen this in California last year. So yes, you have to lock down, but if you lock down early, then it doesn't last as long, and it's more effective, and people don't die. There's if you don't have a treatment and you don't have a vaccine, and by the way, there's no guarantee that we're going to get either of those for the coronavirus, then you have to use this public health technique that we've known in all countries for about 100 years. And if you don't use it, if you're kind of, oh, well, don't worry, that's not as they did, for example, in Bolsonaro did in Brazil, say, oh, no, it's just like the flu, don't worry, don't worry. Then it gets so big that all that's left is the technique that I know against the Black Plague of 1348. I mean, see what I mean?
What happens? What happens now? What happens now to have an efficient recovery of the economy? What should countries be doing, or what should they be doing in the second semester of this year, or maybe next year, to have a sound recovery of the economy?
Well, I think, and I think most people with common sense think that to have a recovery, you got to get on top of it, as people always say. You have to have testing. Donald Trump claims we have plenty of testing, don't worry about it. And then on the other hand, he says, don't test because that tells people that that we have the disease. But come on, the disease is the disease. So testing, tracing, that is, if you have the disease, then your husband is likely to also have it, and then quarantine for a couple of weeks if you've been in contact with someone who did have the disease. And if you don't do that, I'm not sure they're doing it very well in Mexico. We're certainly not doing it well in the United States. Then it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And it's not Ebola.
Deirdre,
nor is it as fatal as the 1919 thing, and it's certainly not the Black Death. So even if we allowed it to go, it wouldn't kill that many people. Still, it's nasty.
Deirdre, what do you think of the measures that some governments are taking of injecting money into the economy, contracting new debt, helping firms that may have failed otherwise? What do you think of those?
Well, in justice, if not in efficiency, if the government says no, you can't, you're a owner of a restaurant, and it says no, you're not allowed to open. Close your doors. Then I think it's only fair that you and me be taxed to pay for it. Now, of course, what the governments are mainly not doing is not taxing but borrowing, and that has its own long-term problems. But I think that if we develop a procedure based on simple public health procedures to bring this under control, then we can just open. And I think in fact, in a way, the coming back of the economy will offer lots of entrepreneurial opportunities. I mean, it's tragic. If half the restaurants in the country fail because of this, let's take restaurants as an example, because it's a particularly precarious kind of industry where restaurants fail all the time. If half of them fail, well, that's an opportunity for people who want to start a restaurant. So I don't think there are big policies to be done on the economic side. I think you have to compensate people for the government-caused hurt.
Some people,
and especially poor people.
Some people believe that this crisis is going to generate bigger governments and more intrusive governments. What do you think?
Well, I'm afraid so. It certainly depends how people interpret its history. if they say, as I say, some competent democratic governments, again, take New Zealand, did it right. But notice it's a small and liberal government, did it right. And some very intrusive governments like that of the Russian Federation didn't do it right. Or actually more extreme case is Brazil. Then I hope they'll learn that small competent government is okay. Large incompetent government is not. But I'm afraid what people are going to say is, oh, you know, it's sort of like a war. War socialism is common enough. If Mexico is invaded by the United States, as we know has happened, then the government needs to draft people and tax people and borrow in order to get an army to stop the Americans. And if they and then that can lead to a conviction that, well, it worked in the war, this centralizing of the economy, let's do it again. So it can go either way. It's up to me and you and others to argue against this. It worked. Therefore, we should have more government.
Deirdre, what are the lessons for the public health systems of the world? What are the lessons that we're learning from this pandemic?
Well, for one thing, we got to spend more money, and not just public money, but also private money on research into viruses. There are over 1.5 million, hear this is a shocking figure, 1.5 million viruses out there in the woods, or out there in the bats, or out there in the pigs. So I think some we, whether it's a spontaneous order we, like a company, or a compelled we, like a government, need to spend more on that. And then we need to know, let's see, we need to fight the fire early.
We need to fight the fire early. So that's one. Do you believe that that we should have a more public health system or a more private health system?
We should have a private health system in general, and only, it's only in extreme cases that we need the public health system to come into operation. Look, we all get colds. The common cold is a coronavirus, which is interesting to note. And we don't get sustained immunity from it because it keeps
changing.
So, should we have big government policies to fight the common cold? No, we shouldn't. Because although it's fatal for some people, very old people or people with very compromised immune systems, there's not anything we can do about it. If someone with a heart disease gets a cold, she's liable. She could easily die. So cold, how catching it is, how much it kills people, and is there anything we can do about it, are the three things that you need to consider in deciding whether to use the coercive powers of the government.
Okay. Deirdre McCloskey, thank you very much for speaking with us this evening.
Certainly.
Thank you. Y a usted, amigo televidente, que hace posible este programa, se lo agradezco también. Esto es todo por hoy, pero no se le olvide. Nos vemos la próxima.